Hello and welcome to Coffee with Dr. Carla. I'm Dr. Carla. This is Lori
Good morning.
and we're so glad that you're here today. Our goal is to talk about some mental health related issues and the stigma surrounding them. So, just as a recap for everybody, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about how you deal with stressors in your life. When we're talking about mental illness, we're talking about things that are diagnosed. So, anxiety, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, etc., etc. Um, and so, there's a variety of ways you could have a mental illness and have um, good mental health, and which means that life is very manageable for you. However, with some of these more complex diagnoses, the capacity to get to that good mental health is often very difficult. And in the process, it impacts everybody around that person, probably family most significantly. So that's what we want to touch on today. Um, so in your experience and, over the years and in your work, what do you see happening in these families when there is somebody with, you know, a significant mental illness that maybe doesn't have good mental health?
So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI,
NAMI? Yep.
which is an advocacy, research and advocacy group,
Tons of great
and
resources. You
lots
don't
of
know
great,
them, go
yep,
check them out.
please
Yeah.
do,
Yep.
says that when a family member is diagnosed with a mental illness, it's like a bomb going off in a family,
Yeah.
and the shrapnel falls on everybody.
Yeah.
That's the best that's the best description
That's it. Thank you,
of what
everybody.
yeah
We're done
by
today.
of what happens.
Yeah.
It is it's catastrophic. It is life altering. It uh, uh, people Every single person goes through a range of emotions. Every single person has a different way they accommodate and adjust to it.
Right.
Given the stigma around mental health, but let alone at a basic level, right?
Right. Because people really don't understand
No,
that distinction
no,
I talked about in the
right,
beginning.
not at all.
Nobody understands.
No,
Or they think mental health is at one end and mental illness is at
right,
another. The reality of it is they both have their own
correct,
continuums, right?
correct,
Yeah.
right. And so, there are people who have no understanding. They think the person's doing this,
They just want
making it up.
attention.
They just want
Right.
attention, and they want them to, pull themselves together, get it together.
Right.
From that on to people who think it's a myth, it's a hoax, this is all made up. To people who are frightened and afraid of the person. Um, to
And sometimes justly.
Sometimes justly, because there are some pretty noxious symptoms that happen when somebody is symptomatic um, with their heavy hitting mental illness.
Yeah.
And, there, while it's exceedingly rare, there can be outbursts of violence.
Yeah.
There can be behaviors that are very worrying. This is more the case. People not taking care of themselves, or people going into risky situations. The reality is, and I really want to emphasize this, that folks who live with these heavy hitting mental illness are more prone to being victims of violence
Right.
rather than perpetrating
Right.
violence.
Because of their
Right.
impulsivity, right? Uh,
Or
or or just
disconnection with reality.
sure, yeah, they end up in
Right.
these really high risk
Right.
situations, and all of
Right.
a sudden,
Right. Um,
whatever happens around them, and
right.
they're just caught in the middle, or they get sucked into some sort of crazy thing, right? Yeah.
Correct. And for many of these really heavy hitting mental illnesses, um, people, when they're symptomatic, they wander, they take off, oftentimes either on a manic jaunt, um, living their best life, uh, not really,
Not really.
or not really,
Only
only
to
to
them.
them,
Yeah, yeah.
or they're delusional or psychotic and, put in very vulnerable situations.
Yeah.
Um, and that's really, 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 really scary for the people who love those folks. And uh, I think family members, I know family members, loved ones, friends learn a whole heck of a lot about the mental health system
More than
in
they ever
more
cared
than
to
they
know,
ever
right? Yeah.
cared to know,
Yeah.
in the United States, and get a very quick understanding of how broken it is, and how we don't know how to respond, as a public health system
Yeah. I'm
to these
I mean, I
illnesses.
know from my own experiences, I in engaging in that system, I would often leave frustrated, resentful, angry,
I
in
left enraged.
right, bewildered,
Yeah,
like I don't
right,
understand
right,
how what the heck, right?
right,
Right? And then also a sense of helplessness, like what are you
right,
supposed to do about it? And how does that get fixed? I mean, that could be another 12 episodes of how do you fix a
right,
system. Well, you don't, you scrap
right,
it and start from fresh. But the reality of it is this is a fight that I hear and have seen so often, people with these significant mental illnesses needing these services,
right.
not getting them, and then ending up
In worse situations and angry at the
or
system
or
and
dying, either
dying.
because they've
Right,
committed suicide
correct.
or because
They've
uh,
been killed
they've been
or they've
killed.
been in high risk situations. Right. I mean,
And it could have been prevented. I mean, at least from most people's eyes, it could have been prevented. So it just gets to be very difficult to navigate. In the
right,
meantime, right, you've got this loved one.
right.
uh, Yeah, I mean, so it's like you're
Uh,
fighting a system, you're fighting this loved one. And when I say fighting the loved one, like trying to keep them
Safe and
alive and safe,
alive.
right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
I mean, Carla, I've been a mental health professional for 30 some odd
yeah,
years. And when a loved one of mine was diagnosed, I was very worried about them and fearful for them and advocating for them. I also had an identity crisis because the field that I'd become educated in,
yeah.
had dedicated my life to, um, was failing. And I got to see it from the other perspective. And it was a sad picture. I mean, I remember sitting on the phone, and I know the system.
Right.
I know the system. And I had at that time very good health insurance. And I remember sitting on the phone, taking off work and sitting on the phone, and I made 52, and I'm going to say that number again, 52
5 2.
phone calls
Yeah.
to service providers trying to get a service that I could not access. I hung up from the 50-second call and cried.
Yeah.
And so my, it, so I always wondered what this must be like for folks
Who
who,
don't even
who don't
understand it.
understand it,
And they don't even know what they
and
don't
they
know.
don't even know
Yeah.
what they don't know, right? And so my best advice is hook up with an advocate with these heavy hitting mental illnesses, community agencies. There are some very good ones where there's wraparound
Yeah.
services, are really important, and getting support so that the family members' mental health, um, can be attended to, their post-traumatic stress disorder. And they just have a safe kind of space where they can process this stuff because it's really hard.
Oh, and there's so many things that you said that we can go into, but unfortunately, we gotta wrap things up. So we'll just have to keep making more videos.
We
That's all.
will. Yeah.
So remember, you can change your thoughts, discover your potential, and transform your life by focusing on your overall well-being. So until next time, continue working on being the best you possible. Bye now.
Bye-bye.